Good evening and welcome. I'm Diane Meyerhoff, host for tonight's candidate forum for Essex Junction Trustee. Tonight's show is being aired live on Channel 17 and streamed live on the Channel 17 website and YouTube. We welcome your comments and questions. Please join the conversation at 862-3966. Tonight, I'm joined by one of the candidates, Raj Chawla. Thank you very much for joining me tonight.
Thank you.
We are going to talk about why you're running for village trustee and some of the hot topics for Essex and Essex Junction. So please tell us about what qualifies you, what are you interested in, what made you decide to run?
Well, we've lived in the village for about 14 years, and in that time, we've raised our daughters there, and I've always just been impressed and a little blown away by how much time the people I know give back to the community, whether it's coaching or volunteering. It's impressive and sort of awe-inspiring, and I don't coach. I'm interested in politics. I'm interested in issues that impact our community. So this was a great opportunity. I was encouraged by some people in the village and decided to try it. Not 100% sure this is going to be great for me, but
okay.
I'm really excited to give it a shot. And I've served on some communities in the village in the past. I'm currently on the Bike Walk Advisory Committee, which is, concerns itself with walking and cycling issues in the village. We pay attention to sidewalks and bike lanes and programs that will help people with all of those issues. Most recently, before that, on the Recreation Governance Study Committee, which looked at merging the town and village recreation departments. I was an early participant in what became the Essex Governance Group, which was looking at increasing participation in local government and streamlining voting. Our community being a village within a town, there's a lot to pay attention to, and so streamlining that is something very near and dear to a lot of people's hearts. And some school stuff in between.
Mm-hmm. And so tell me a little bit about the governance group and what did you talk about? You sounded you talked about way to get folks to participate more, sort of at the level of the public coming out to speak, or at the trustees level, or what kind of things did you hear and find out?
I think the group was primarily concerned in increasing participation by people who live in the community, increasing transparency, what they saw as communication coming from the boards and the government entities. Streamlining voting was very important. We have, as village residents, we have two meetings to go to. We have the town meeting for the town of Essex, because we're residents of the town, and then we have the village annual meeting, which is coming up for us on April 3rd. So there's two budgets that we vote on, but you have to be at town meeting to vote for both of those meetings. Then we have Australian ballots. So all in all, village residents village residents vote, I think it's 5 times. Wow. Every time we need to. So streamlining that.
So it's a lot to ask of folks, in other words.
It's a lot to ask, and it impacts participation. So I participated early on that. That group became much more formalized. They produced a great report and some action items. That's rolling slowly. I just looked at it last week, and I think some of the issues that were raised there are being addressed. Mm-hmm. And as we look in the Essex Junction community at potential new governance models, a lot of those concerns will be addressed as well.
Yeah. Now talk a little bit about the Essex Junction village budget that you're proposing. I assume you're voting on that on April 3rd?
Yep. The trustees, I think, put together a pretty solid budget. Mm-hmm. It's a very minimal increase, a reasonable increase.
Do you know what the number is?
It's just under 3%, I believe. Okay. I want to say 2.8, but I'm just under 3. Mm-hmm. I think it's reasonable. I thought it was responsible, and I don't really have any issues with it.
Nothing you would particularly change, or?
No. We have a lot of capital and infrastructure needs and concerns, and I think they're trying to address those as quickly as possible. There are some on the books that are coming along, and I think, what George Tyler said here a couple of nights ago, the trustees are very concerned with the fact that village taxpayers especially are paying into the town budget as well, and the school budget. So the village municipal budget being, I think, the lowest of the 3. Mm-hmm. They really try to keep the the increases down. I think they did a good job of that.
And you talked a little bit about infrastructure. Talk to me about what the situation of infrastructure, underground, roadways, et cetera, are particularly for the village, and I suppose things you're seeing in the town too, if that's appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, the village has a lot of work that's going to need to be done. You know, there's some sidewalks that are in pretty bad shape, for one, and there was just a sidewalk study, I believe, completed for the entire community that we'll be hearing about soon. You know, we've added sidewalks in the village. That doesn't mean that the existing sidewalks are in great shape. You know, we've always been concerned about, you know, people with mobility issues, whether you're in a wheelchair, whether your balance isn't great, you know, how they're functioning on some of the sidewalks. The roads, you know, we're a high traffic community. We're one of the commuter pass-throughs. I think I've heard something along the lines of 30,000 cars a day go through 5 corners.
Even with the circ.
Yeah, well, what little of the circ is built, right? Yeah. So, you know, our smaller neighborhood roads there's some in really bad shape that have a lot of people upset. Yeah. I think the Capital Committee is looking at various ways to increase funding and find funding sources for that to address. I mean, it's that particular area, I think, is going to be the steepest learning curve for me. In how all of that comes together, because there's so many different funding sources and so many different entities that participate in getting that work done. That's going to be. Yeah. I'm going to rely on the trustee. Right. There's never enough money, and you know, there's been various ideas thrown around, but all of them involve raising more money. Sure. So there are various ways to do that, and they impact different populations. And I'm going to be relying heavily, I think, on the unified manager and the other trustees to get me up to speed if elected.
Sure, sure. But you do have experience on the bike walk committee, so you've certainly done a lot of thinking about these. And we've secured some grants for some pretty interesting work. Yeah. We've got some crosswalk signals going in that the trustees helped to match a grant from VTrans for that, so hopefully that happens this summer, fall, in some pretty key locations. Love to get a conversation with the school board about what they can do to work with the village, if that's appropriate. To, you know, they're bringing busing to the community as soon as they can find some drivers. They're having some trouble with that. I guess that's happening everywhere too. Yeah.
Right. But there will still be zones around each school where students are expected to walk. Yeah. So in those areas, I think the school can play a role in some way, shape, or form to ensure that there's a safe route to school, sure, whether it's on bike or on foot for students, and that may mean looking at how many crossing guards are there, or participating in you know, acquiring more crosswalk beacons or what have you.
And do those tend to be areas that are a priority in terms of walking and biking when you look at how you spend your money? I mean, would you say those are probably some of the most important ones to get kids to school?
I think, yeah. I mean, I think. We have a high population of students that do walk and bike, especially in the village core. It's something that people are very proud of, I think, in the village, and it's a great community to be able to do that in. So the Bike Walk Committee, for sure, has concentrated on those areas, especially where we've cited the 3, I believe it's 3 new beacon systems that we've put in. We looked at all of the school areas to.
Are those the ones that you push the button and it flashes?
Blink, right,
yeah. Okay.
So you can overdo it. There can be too many of them.
Yeah, it's an ongoing issue.
So we're trying to be careful in terms of how we recommend placement, so that, you know, eventually if there's too many, I suppose they could be ignored.
Yeah, well, anything can be ignored, I guess, when you're driving a car. We know that.
So, you know, there are a lot of partners to draw on.
Yeah, yeah. So sort of all the things we've talked about, I think, hit on the issue of consolidation or merger or whatever appropriate words. I know there's different words we use when we talk about this. I'm going to use consolidation, but if that's not the appropriate phrase, I apologize. Talk to me about what that looks like now. I feel like certainly over the years we've seen a movement toward that, but you know, where do you see that going, or where would you like, I suppose, to see that go?
I can't, off the top of my head, rattle off all of the
no, I wouldn't expect
departments and positions that have been merged. I know Public Works is a biggie. We have a unified manager now that we the two entities share. There's common billing and tax collection and things. And I've seen, I think the trustees and the select board quoted the figure of something like $2.1 million has been saved over 5 years just doing that. So that's great. You know, while this is going on, there's a subcommittee of the select board and the trustees looking at possible changes to how the community is governed.
So wholesale change.
Wholesale changes to how the community is governed. And I wouldn't call that merger as much as, you know, is there a way we can redesign, you know, the whole governance for the whole community. So while that is going on, I would personally like to see the efforts at, you know, future consolidation of other positions or other departments kind of stop.
Okay.
I think we need to figure the governance question out. I think there's a goal of the presidential election in 2020 to have something to put before the voters.
Okay.
And that's a pretty aggressive timeline.
Yeah. Okay.
I understand the subcommittee has 3 options they've narrowed it down to, and they're going to try to flesh out. So I'm excited to see how that plays out. But in the meantime, I think we really need to kind of stop. We've gone and I think done probably the low-hanging fruit.
Yes, that's what I think the manager and select board, and trustee chair, whatever, had said that was probably the issue, that it's going to get harder and harder.
Right, and you know, village residents are looking for tax equity. But what comes with that is an understanding that, you know, whatever we do has to have value for people in the town. So, you know, we can want tax equity, right? We can want tax equity, but that might be a negative to a town taxpayer. So we have to figure out, you know, how we're both achieved. How is there value for the town resident in coming together with us in some way?
Right.
If we find tax equity, so that bill is still there. So we may not get to a complete and total merger.
Yeah.
There may be some things that are still left for the village to deal with, but I really just don't know.
Yeah.
But I think until the governance conversation has played out, I think we need to just kind of put the brakes on it and you know, take advantage of the savings we found, but finish the governance conversation and see what that's going to do.
And so it's not necessarily a failure, quote unquote, if all the departments don't merge. I mean, there are it sounds like there are many ways, really. And I guess I've always thought about it as merge, no merge. I've never actually thought about that there's really a lot of iterations, and especially when you talk about governance, that's huge, right?
Right. Well, I mean, if we merge, we're going to have to figure out what to do with this community that one board represents that's now technically twice as big. You know, it's still the same, I suppose, for the select board, right? Because they represent the village and the town, inside and outside the village. So they sort of represent everyone.
Yep.
But then how do you have representation? Do we need fixed representation for certain areas, and how does that look? All of those questions are being looked at. What happens, I think there's not a lot left. There's recreation, which has been a conversation.
And part of it's in process, or at least they're going to co-locate, right?
They're co-locating.
Right? Yes, okay, I know there was some change there.
They're co-locating, and that, you know, that's an effort to really make it easier on residents. You know, when you go and you have to pay one bill on Main Street, and then you have to go through the neighborhood to Maple Street to pay the other bill, or do whatever you're going to do, it's really inconvenient. So this is a good step. I think libraries are going to be a conversation. Recreation is going to be a conversation, and everything that's sort of left undone.
Police, fire, the unionized folks, are they all separate still?
Police are already done. That's its own unit. Fire, the communities have unified sort of how they're paid and how they're trained, I believe, is my understanding.
So that's well on their way.
I don't know if they're in the same union or have the same contract, but they're mostly volunteer.
Okay, right.
So I don't know if there are. That's a great question for me to find out if there are paid. there must be 1 or 2 paid positions, and the rest volunteer. I would think. Yeah. I should know. I should look that up.
You can find out.
But I think, you know, as I say, I don't know if it's going to be. You know, in the past we've gone all or nothing. Right? Those efforts have been sort of, we're going to merge, or we're going to separate, or we're going to do whatever. Right. And I think, you know, obviously those didn't work, and the folks involved over the past 5 or 8 years have decided, let's try a different path.
Sure. Well, yeah, and there's something easy about going to vote yes or no, right?
Right.
But having to vote on maybe 5 different iterations might be a much harder thing to understand, too.
Right, and I think you'll find people in the town who will say, you know, we've saved money, too, doing this. And, you know, there may be some that say we didn't, but I think that the truth is we have saved money over time getting to where we are. Right. At least as far as I understand it.
Right. And I don't know that that was always an overshadowing issue. I don't recall, I mean, when all the votes happened, that was something that was the premier reason for doing it. I think part of it, as you say, is the transparency issue, the governance issue, making it life a little easier for the folks who live in one or the other. And you know, I think there were a lot of others. So I think that in some ways that was kind of the icing on the cake. And whether that continues, that's not going to be as clear.
Yeah, I think yes, all of that is very true. And I think for village voters, village residents, you know, with 2 tax bills, you know, there was a financial aspect of it too, and then consequently for town voters who were looking, well, if we fix this, then it goes up for us. Right. You know, like I said earlier, that you know, it's great to say we want to merge, but we have to figure out how it works for both. Right. Because if we just look at a town resident and say, town outside the village resident and say, well, your taxes are going to go up, that's just a non-starter. Right. And it's not fair. Right. Right. And so one way or the other, it'd be great to figure this out and move on and do other things. Right. Because it takes up a lot of, historically, it takes up a lot of bandwidth and a lot of effort. So putting that effort into coming up with a creative downtown. Yeah, let's actually talk about what some of those things are when we get past that point. Sure. Because, you know, maybe you'll be in trustees for a long time. Maybe. Well, I think, you know, we need to look at you know, what comes next and how to keep the, you know, from my perspective, how to keep the village vibrant. We've started to attract artists, creative types. We've got a very active population. Increasingly senior population as well. You know, how do we keep downtown as an attractive, fun, safe place to go, and you know, move beyond being a place where people, you know, are in the evening and on weekends. Or pass through, probably. Or pass through. Well, right? And I think there are some interesting ideas. You know, we're having this, hopefully the Crescent Connector, which will be this bypass road around 5 Corners, will alleviate a little bit of traffic at 5 Corners. The word is that should work. So if when the Crescent Connector gets built, if the predictions are true, that takes pressure off 5 Corners, which allows us to then look at how can we change 5 Corners. Maybe it goes to 4, which would make it smaller and less dense and more attractive for people to be in the downtown area. Sure. And then what does that mean for attracting businesses, and what does that mean for, we've already got some I think, increased activity in the village. I mean, we had a coffee shop come in almost 2 years ago, then a couple other businesses. And there's not a lot of empty space, is there? I'm trying to think when I've been through last. Is it? I don't think there's a lot of empty space. There could be more to draw people in. We certainly, I think it's definitely changed in the last 3 or 4 years, though. There are more places to eat, and more things to do. I think those changes, if they're made, the idea is that people will want to be there. It'll feel more comfortable being on foot. It'll feel more comfortable walking around that area. So you'll stay longer. Sure. If you feel like you're walking 3 feet from cars zipping through a giant intersection, and that's all it has to offer, then it's not really a thought of where you want to go and where you want to shop. And there's also a lot of new residential, I mean, at least from my recollection. And it's interesting, I talked to some of those folks, and they love going to the restaurants and the bars and such down in the village. Like, they don't even bother leaving town. You know, they can walk, which is great. So that seems like that's also been, there's been a lot of new units, yes? There have, and there are, I think, there are many, many more proposed. And are you is that a concern on the flip side? Do you think that's going to get too congested, or is there some kind of balance to be struck here? You know, we just had a parking study completed, because the impression has been that parking is a huge issue in the downtown area. But the report came back identifying some hot spots and some potential hot spots should some of this development go in. but also had solutions. And I think the general consensus is we max out at 60% capacity. Okay. So we don't really have a parking problem.
Yeah, we have a perceived parking problem.
we have a parking problem of you know, you want to go and park right in front of the business you want to go to.
Yep, we're all guilty
but maybe
of that.
you're going to, right, sure. And maybe you need to park around the corner and then walk a block or half a block to where your destination is. And you know, we are going, I think the idea is we're going for a semi-urban feel. Mm-hmm. My hope is while we have all this development, that we sort of take what's called a health and all policies approach to this. I've recently received a master's in public health, so I'm all gung-ho.
Okay.
But there is this concept of integrating concerns about how decisions made in municipal government and other decision-making, how that takes into account the impact on one's health. Mm-hmm. And you're talking about, you know, just access to local and affordable food, affordable, efficient transportation, everything that goes into the overall health and well-being of the resident. Having that be part of the rubric when you're making decisions around how you're going to zone, how you're going to approve development, where you're going to put parking, what infrastructure you're going to work on and when.
You know what? We're gonna wrap it up right there, because that's a good thing for folks to remember. Give them some food for thought.
Great.
And we should just let folks know when should they vote? When do they need to come out?
The vote for trustee and the school board is April 9th from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at Essex High School. Okay. The village annual meeting where you vote on the budget is April 3rd. There's a community dinner at 6 and the meeting at 7. Okay. And where, high school.
And is that when are you elected? When would you be elected, or when is your race?
April 9th.
Yours the April 9th.
Australian ballot at the high school.
Australian ballot. Yep. Okay, good. So everyone knows where they need to be.
Yes.
I'm sure it's all on the website of the village as well. Yep. So thank you so much. Appreciate it so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. And we hope you will vote on April 3rd and 9th in Essex. Thank you so much and good night.